Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And today we are talking about knowledge versus wisdom.
Right.
Particularly as it relates to child custody. So in your child custody case.
Right. So the source of this, Tammy was telling me this story about one of her coaching clients that has an attorney that's always taking a hard line on stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like she advises this person to take a position even in her communication
with her ex.
Yeah,
yes.
To the point where we're kind of giving her the opposite advice of an attorney. And it's kind of like, I mean, I've done so many of these cases, and I've gotten so many good child custody results in my time as an attorney, and I can tell you for certain that Tammy's right.
Tammy's always right. No, I'm just kidding.
Tammy is always right. She is always right. You know, grass or water's wet, you know.
Grass is green.
Grass is green, and Tammy's always right.
No, but I mean, the interesting thing about this for me is like, it's really hard because it's like, obviously, you know, that's the person giving her legal advice, right? So yeah. I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to go against that. And this is in a different state and everything anyway, but it's just that it's like, in a practical sense, the knowledge that is being dumped into her head from this attorney is knowledge that the attorney may feel that it'll help on the legal side, but what it's going to do is totally blow up the co-parenting relationship. And I think there's a balance to those two things, because the co-parenting relationship is the thing that's going to stick with you.
Right. Well, when we go to law school, they don't teach us to be wisdom, but they do.
To be wisdom?
To be wise. Right. Thank you for the correction. They don't teach wisdom, really. They fill your head full of cases and case law. Mm-hmm. And what we're trained to do is argue both sides. So what the law professor will do is, you have to read the facts of this case in advance of the class, and they mm-hmm. call on you, and whatever position you take, they take the other.
Right, and they argue with you.
And
sounds like my kind of class.
Sounds like my marriage with Tammy, right?
Oh goodness, not really, but
not really. No. I'm just kidding.
I know.
But the thing is, you know, we take that template out into the world,
right?
And we find out that those categories are not always. Life doesn't exactly fit into them,
right?
And what you have to understand is there's some things that might be correct in your attorney's eyes, but they're not smart.
You know, they're not wise.
They're not wise, right?
Right.
And this is a biblical thing, that the Bible teaches that wisdom is something to be sought after. If you read the book of Proverbs, there's the first 7 chapters are about how great it is to have wisdom, and how it is more important than having knowledge.
Right, because those are two different things. Because you can know something, but then if you can't apply it in a wise way, then it's not helpful.
Right.
It's not helpful. So if you have this legal knowledge, but we're applying it in a way that totally blows up that family, to me, that's not wise.
Right.
You know, because, and I think that's the thing that's so unique about family law. And to be fair, family law is not really this attorney's, you know, day-to-day thing. She's sort of, you know, this particular client has, you mm-hmm. know, a couple different issues going. And so the attorney's kind of handling all of them. And one of them is her family law case. And so it's just, it really does come down to, you know, what is going to be in the not only your best interest, but your children's best interest, your ex's best interest, and frankly,
your family's best interest,
your whole family's best
right.
interest. And honestly, I think that, you know, blowing everything up and trying to essentially essentially the attorney's trying to get her to like document the whole case through her email communication, which is one of the things that you and I say, huge no.
Right.
Don't do this. And to me, I mean, again, I'm not the attorney. It's definitely not legal advice by any means, but just from a logical perspective, it's like, once you sit and read this stuff all day, every day, and, as much as you and I read, I can only imagine how many different things a judge reads.
Mhm.
And then you get this kind of email where people are like documenting their case, through these email threads. As a judge, I would think that you just look at that and go, that's totally disingenuous.
Right.
Nobody talks that way about their kids.
Right.
Nobody goes into these legal arguments when they're coordinating,
Right.
Except maybe to say, please see the current orders that say
Right.
blah, blah, blah,
Right.
But to be documenting your arguments through that, to me, is just so obviously absurd to a judge that I think it makes you look worse.
Right.
Even if everything that you're saying in there or that your attorney is telling you to say in there is correct. And interestingly enough, I think that this attorney has an emotional reaction herself
Right.
to the communications from the ex-husband because they're attacking.
Yeah.
The communication that's coming from ex-husband is attacking.
Right.
And I think the attorney herself is having some sort of like visceral reaction to that.
Yeah.
And
And
she
I
wants-
can relate to that.
Yeah, and she wants to come back at him, and sometimes you do sort of, especially if it's a
Yeah,
case.
you can't let him away with that. You can't leave that in the record unrebutted, but you can't do that. And to be fair to her, that's what they teach us. It is.
Right. And
Right.
and so if you have an attorney that, especially if it's never been through a divorce, never been through this kind of on the personal side, I find that there's a lot more of that kind of, knowledge approach because you don't have the life wisdom because you haven't been through this.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you can't understand what this does to somebody's family moving
Right.
forward.
Right. The fact that of my own divorce has actually given me a perspective that has been valuable time and time again.
Right.
And we get better results when we are wise than when we are correct. I don't know whether you remember this case. I'm sure you do, actually. We were representing a guy that was kind of a stay-at-home dad, and he was married to
I already know who you're
a
talking
woman. Yeah, he was married to a woman.
about. Obviously.
Obvious. Well,
Well,
not
I mean,
so obviously these
Well,
days.
if he's most of the time, if he's dead and she's a mom, that's that's the
Right.
situation.
But this guy has had a tight relationship with the kids, and she filed 2 documents with her petition. She filed a petition, and she filed a request for an ex parte,
An emergency hearing.
an
yeah.
emergency hearing, and she was able to persuade the court to grant the emergency order, and everything from that point on with this attorney was adversary. And we're taught in law school that we have a duty of zealous representation to our client. We have a duty of loyalty to our client.
Of course. Yeah.
And most attorneys, I would say more than half of them, take that to kind of a ridiculous extreme
Right.
because we're competitive, We
Yeah.
want to win.
Yeah.
And so the case starts out with a bang.
Right.
And there's all this stuff. But really, at the end of the case, she didn't get what she wanted.
Right. And the thing is that, of course you want somebody that's loyal and that will give you zealous representation. But if zealous representation is going to destroy the entire family unit, then how effective was that representation
Right.
to start with? Like I said, there's a balance to everything. And when you have somebody that sort of comes out guns blazing, shooting everything in its path, so to speak,
Right.
metaphorically, then what are you going to be left with except carnage? And
Right.
and I see.
I call it the Pickett's charge.
Yeah, I see so many
Yeah.
cases come out, and there's so much carnage that parents can't cooperate anymore at that
Right.
point. And it's never easy. Let's face it. And some situations are harder than others, and sometimes certain things are warranted. Sometimes you're dealing with somebody on the other side that doesn't know any other answer, and you can't do anything else. But the vast majority of time, that's doing more damage than it is good. And what happened in that case is exactly what you and I talk about a lot, which is that you can win the battle and lose the war.
That's true.
And that's exactly what happened. And we have seen that over and over,
Right.
because 99 times out of 100, the court will eventually
Right. And
figure out what's going on.
And we told the fella,
Yeah.
you got to be
Oh,
patient.
we coached him and coached
Yeah.
him and coached him.
You got
It's
to
like,
be
take
patient.
a deep breath.
Can't-
It'll be okay.
Don't fire back.
Yeah.
You know,
He was
not
having a tough time emotionally,
too
too.
many words
Yep.
in that communication.
Yeah.
And we were trying to teach him wisdom
Mhm.
and how to support the family system
Right.
rather than just reacting to her attack.
Right. Right. And we encouraged him to encourage the kids to go with her and all those things. But ultimately, one of the children ended up refusing to go at all after they got a little bit older. And I think has essentially almost no relationship with
Right.
mom at this point. And it's all a result of, at least from our perspective, it's all a result of that emergency hearing and the way that they tried to wrest custody completely from dad in
Mhm.
the very beginning. I think that attorney did a huge disservice to
Yeah.
that client, because it destroyed what little relationship she had left with that, at least that one particular child.
Right. And I think that's a very common tactic in family law,
Mhm.
that an aggressive attorney will file a domestic violence restraining order,
Right.
or they'll file some kind of emergency order that's designed to right away have the other parent wearing the black hat.
Right.
And
Right.
and if you step back from that and look what that does to the family system, and I think that a lot of times, and this will show perhaps a bias, I'm an old guy, but it seems like it's the young attorneys.
Yeah. Well, and if we're going to just add to that bias, let me just say it's more often than not young female attorneys.
Young female.
Not always. This particular case we're talking about, this was a young guy on the other side, but
Right.
but still, yeah. And I think that the reason for that is simply because most of the time the younger attorneys haven't been through this. They either haven't
Right.
gone through a divorce yet. They haven't had that experience. And the reason I think that it leans more towards the female is because we just tend to be more emotional creatures. That's just naturally how
Right.
we are. And so, and I think in the world we live in, where, as women, we're trying to prove we can do everything a man can do. And like you always say, do it while giving birth. Right. So I think that there's a little bit of that, because let's face it, traditionally law has been,
It's been male dominated.
it's been male dominated. And so when you're a female in that world, there's a certain part of you that feels like you gotta be able to be as aggressive, hold your own, whatever, in that male dominated world. And it can be intimidating, and it can
Right.
be hard. And I think
And also you've got them competing with one another inside the office for who gets the most billing,
right.
who gets the biggest, if you
Right.
bill more hours in, you get a bigger bonus.
Who makes partner?
Who makes partner, and it's it's basically it's wise to step back and look at the total motivation, especially when you're dealing with your attorney. You want to deal with your attorney in a way that, because they want to come off as the expert.
Right.
And wisdom tells you that you are in control of your own case, and you have to make wise decisions for your family. And the wise decisions are, they're big picture decisions. They're not, how do I win this motion? How do I compel this discovery?
Right.
How do I get an emergency order, or whatever it is? What are the elements in the statute that'll give me my emergency order?
Right. Well, and that's how your attorney brain is thinking.
Yeah, that's in that, and we're trained to do that. But it's better to, if you're the client, if you're the parent in this situation, to think, what's going on in this family system? What is the child's motivation? Because frequently the children are manipulating their parents, and they're using the court and the parents to get what they want. Okay. What's and I know you talk about this a lot, Tammy, is what is the payoff for somebody who's harassing you or somebody who's using the court system to just make your life miserable?
Right. Well, the payoff most of the time is that they're keeping the attention on them only in a negative way.
Right.
And what tends to happen is, a lot of times I'll see somebody say to the other spouse, well, please stop doing that.
Right.
Please leave me alone. I disagree with all of the things in your below email and, things like that. And honestly, depending on the type of person that you're dealing with, and a lot of times in these high conflict divorce cases where people are really having trouble managing the other party, a lot of times the other party does have some sort of high conflict personality.
Right.
There's a multitude of diagnoses that fall into that category. But and Bill Eddy writes a lot on this about high conflict personalities and divorce. But when you're dealing with somebody like that, a lot of times what that person is doing is trying to feel superior to you.
Right.
And so the more that they can manipulate your behavior, the more they can get you to overreact, the more they can get you to be overly emotional, then they're winning.
Right.
Then they're sitting there going, oh, haha, look at me. I got this person to, and I always tell people, like, it's not that conscious.
Yeah.
High conflict personalities aren't real conscious of that kind of thing, I don't think. I think it's just sort of, it's just their normal, natural way of moving through the world because they've been through their own damage or whatever happened to them that caused them to be a high conflict person. And they never learned enough wisdom emotionally.
Right.
To be,
like emotional intelligence.
Right. To behave any other way.
Right. And then there's ways of dealing with that person that disarm them.
Right.
And, we talk about this a lot. I think that our whole approach to family law is in many ways a wisdom approach.
Right.
As opposed to just having every last penny divided down to the penny. And,
right.
And making sure that everybody has a fair result or whatever that is.
Right.
But we focus on, like, for example, it's wise to realize that your biggest ally in the case is not your attorney. A lot of times it is, but usually not, because the attorney's interests are diametrically opposed to yours. They make more money if they get more conflict. That fella gets his bonus if he bills in more hours. So in some ways, you're working at cross purposes, and that doesn't mean you don't work with your attorney, because you do need to work with your attorney, but you got to do it in a smart way.
Right, and you got to find the right attorney. I would interview multiple, have your questions. Don't be afraid to ask. It's as much your interview as it is the attorney's. It's interesting that you brought up that particular perspective, because I actually had a call today, like an intake call for a client that was potentially wanting to utilize coaching services with us. And one of the things the client said on the phone is, I want somebody outside the process who doesn't have a financial gain from the level of conflict in my case, or the level of difficulty in my case.
And that's your coach.
And yes, and this particular person actually wanted, like, sort of a combination of coaching from me and you, because there were certain things that are like, dealing with the other person and the communication and the day-to-day, and certain probably paralegal things I can answer. But then there's also, certain times that they want to be able to ask, your advice based on your experience as an attorney and all that kind of stuff. So, they were kind of like, because I said, do you have a preference? Who do you want to, work with? And, the person said, well, actually, I'd like a combination of the two of you, if that's an option. I said, sure, we have packages for that.
Right.
So, but, the big concern was that they just wanted somebody that was totally outside of their process.
Right.
And the thing they said to me is, they said, I've been working with a lawyer, but frankly, I'm not really getting, like, fantastic results. I'm just getting kind of, I go in, the situation wasn't great, and then I get this kind of result that's like, and they said, I feel like I could do
Right.
that myself. Like, I don't
Right.
need, and so I think the point of being able to turn this case around is to start to work on the day to day, and the relationship between the parents is very, very fractured.
Yeah.
And the communication is extremely poor. And honestly, when you're struggling in your court case, a lot of times that's where you need to start.
Right.
You need to start in the day-to-day communication between mom and dad, because that's usually at the root of all of it. Because
I agree.
you had this experience with your ex-wife several years ago where, everything was going fine. We're jogging along, right, in life. And then you have this phone call with her, and everything just blew up, and she filed something in court.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it was because of something that you said on the call that just
rubbed her the wrong way. I hit a mine.
Yeah. And then there we were. And honestly, a lot of times the court hearings are coming from emotional issues that are taking place outside of court that flow over into court.
Right. Another example that I would give of this is, we had that case where the court clearly made a wrong decision without considering the evidence in a child custody case. And I knew exactly what to do as a lawyer.
Right.
I filed a writ, and
Right.
it was successful.
Right.
And we got the case overturned. But ultimately, that case is going to be decided. The outcome of that case is based on the relationship of those parents to their children, and nothing else.
Right. Right.
The court can make orders all it wants to. If the relationship between that child and their father is fractured, then that father has to take the initiative to recover that relationship.
Right.
And do things that make that child feel loved and cared for. Not necessarily, like we said last week, but not backing down on discipline or anything, but being willing to be a parent.
Yeah, be there.
Yeah, the kids appreciate that.
They do.
And that's that big picture wisdom. I mean, I knew to file the writ.
Right.
But, sometimes the client comes to me and they say, well, we need to appeal this decision. It's wrong. And I say to them, well, first of all, it's going to cost you a lot of money, and it's probably going to be denied.
Yeah. I mean, you usually are, I know you can't predict outcomes, but you usually have a fairly good idea of whether it's worth it to even attempt it. If a lot of times I hear you say, no, I wouldn't even file this if I were you. It's not, we kind of had that from another attorney, a few weeks ago, where we, the other party had filed a domestic violence thing, and then the other client, the opposing party that had the domestic violence filed against them, retained us, and then the person that originally filed the DV retained an attorney, and that attorney essentially reached out to you and said, hey, I'd like to work towards settlement on this, which essentially means, I know my hand's not great. It's code 4.
Yeah. I'm not holding the good cards.
Yeah.
Got a pair of twos.
Yeah, it's not looking good, or else I'm going to have to bluff real hard.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, sometimes you do need to go toe to toe, and sometimes you do have to file a DV. Sometimes there is really bad physical abuse and all that. But but a lot of times people are filing them when, it's just normal conflict. That there was never violence in the marriage, and they're having normal conflict now. And attorneys will say, let's file a DV because they're trying to get the upper hand.
Yeah, domestic violence.
Domestic violence on the custody and everything. And so I mean, that's not wise. That's called spending a lot of money. That's called blowing up your family life. And if there isn't, physical abuse or something that you're really afraid of, then that's a waste of your time, energy, and resources.
Right. Now, here's a piece of wisdom, and this comes from Dina Stacer, one of my old mentors in this business. And she said to me, don't be surprised when divorcing people have conflict.
Right.
be surprised if they don't have conflict.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Of course they have conflict.
Right. Otherwise, you wouldn't be getting a divorce.
So the wise thing to do is do whatever is in your own power,
right,
to shut that conflict down, to disarm it, to pour some water on it,
right.
And that's why we tell our clients, be nice. Now, just try being nice. It'll freak them out.
Yeah, it will freak them out. It'll be like the other side will be like they'll have to change the way they're reacting.
Right.
But that's really hard. I mean, sometimes you have to sit there through gritted teeth while you are typing that. I mean, I have one of my clients that says, I always hear you in my head, be nice, be nice, be nice. She's like, I'm so sick of hearing you tell me to be nice, you know.
How come you're not nice to me?
Because nobody's telling me to be nice.
That's right.
Yeah. But in the very beginning, and I've actually been working with this client for a couple of years, one of my coaching clients. And so, in the very beginning, she was very emotional and she would fire off and say things. And it's like, okay, well, you have to decide if the short-term pleasure of telling him off is worth, what you lose in the case. Because you either lose one of two things. One of three things. You either lose money or you lose your peace.
Right.
Or you lose time with your children.
Right.
Because if they can paint you as this horrible person, well, look how they're reacting. And then the court goes, well, is this, did you hurt that? Does that hurt the person's credibility enough where the court goes, kind of question this person's credibility because of the way they're being emotionally reactive.
Right. And that's where I step in as the attorney. I mean, you don't need to communicate. You don't need to write your declaration in your co-parenting communication.
Right.
That's for me to do in the brief, in the declaration, and I'm very capable of doing that. And that's my role.
Right.
But at the same time, you want to do what you can to disengage from conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Disengage from conflict. That's wise.
Right.
It doesn't say, there's no statute that says thou shalt disengage from conflict.
Right.
The statute says that custody is preferred to the person that supports the other parent. That's a very rough paraphrase of what our custody, our best interest standard is.
Right.
But it's very important to the courts that you be supportive of the other parent. And it's wise.
Right.
It's wise to behave in the opposite. And this is in the Bible too. What does it say? A gentle answer turns away wrath.
Right.
In other words, somebody's angry and when I'm out surfing and oh, you cut me off and my first inclination is to argue my case. Mm-hmm. Well, I was up first.
Well, you are an attorney.
Yeah. So yeah. But it ruins the vibe in the water. Everybody's paying attention to you, and it ends up ruining your session.
Right.
The best thing to do is, man, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, I'll be more careful next time.
Right. Of course, that's wisdom of age and all that stuff, right? And previous experiences and all that.
That's the gray head.
Yes, yes. And this is why, I think this is why the struggle is so hard in the very beginning is, if you make those mistakes in the very beginning of your case, you don't have legal knowledge from most people, right? Unless you are an attorney or something. If you are, I'm assuming you're probably not listening to this, but you don't have the legal knowledge, and you also don't have the wisdom at that stage.
Right.
And emotional wise, you're a wreck.
Yeah.
So even if you normally are a person with emotional intelligence, I'm telling you, this will bring you to your knees.
Right.
And so that's why we see these really significant mistakes in the beginning. And a lot of times, I've got a couple clients who have made such grave mistakes in the beginning that trying to turn their case around is a huge uphill battle.
Right.
You're fighting against that first impression the court had of you throughout your whole case.
Right.
And I always say the earlier we can get somebody, the so much more impact you can have. The earlier you get them,
Right.
the more impact you can have.
True.
Now, that's not to say that if you're, up to your eyeballs, that
Because the
you
high
shouldn't
conflict
call us,
cases,
but
they're the ones that get the reputation.
right,
Is the high conflict cases are the ones they remember.
right. But I think people don't always understand the value of having that third party sort of neutral person, I guess, so to speak. I mean, it's somebody that's on your side, but it's somebody that doesn't care if your case is won or lost, or like doesn't really have a dog in the fight. That way, their only dog in the fight is to get the best, help you create the best possible life you can, through this. And so if you get help earlier, because how many times have we had somebody come in that they already got a bad family court services report,
Right.
or they're already on their fourth attorney,
Right.
or they've already been to a child custody eval and it didn't go well for
Or they
them.
already got a 5-year restraining
Or they
order.
already got a 5-year restraining order. Right. Pick your thing.
Yeah,
right?
right.
And once they come in with that, it's like, okay, we got to roll up our sleeves and take the long-term approach.
Right.
And it would have been so much easier if they had sought help before those events occurred, because you could steer them in the right direction. Right.
You know how you can tell if something's wise? Because usually it's the opposite of what the person wants to do.
Right.
It gets their back up a little bit. It's like, oh, I can't do that.
Yeah, it's the opposite of
what are you, soft-hearted or something?
It's the opposite of your inclination.
Right.
And if you have to, like, especially if you're co-parenting, like, you have to tell yourself, I am biting my tongue for my children. Like,
there you go.
So many times I had to tell myself, okay, I'm not going to fire back for my children. I'm doing this for my children. And so many people say, like, why should I be nice to the other person? You don't need to be nice to the other person. You're not doing it for the other person. You're being nice because it helps your case. It helps your kids. It helps keep the conflict down. It helps your family.
Yeah.
That's really the goal.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we could say about wisdom, and that's really what we teach. If you listen to the podcast from episode 1,
right?
Like, it's wise to understand that you focus your energy on things you can control.
Right.
You can't control the narcissist's behavior,
right?
But you can control your own behavior,
right?
And you can extinguish the narcissism, the attacks, and so forth, by the way you react to them.
Right.
Or
right.
don't react, as the case may be.
Right. And it's very interesting because Thomas and I have sort of unknowingly become part of an life experiment in a way, because, we've been doing this a long time with Thomas's ex-wife, and we talk a lot about how we have a very highly cooperative relationship with her at this point. But, she has recently gone through her second divorce. Well, I shouldn't say recently. It's been a couple years ago. She went through a second divorce, and they have 2 children together as well. And the outcome of that is super high conflict.
Right.
Yeah. Super high conflict. They're having all kinds of trouble getting along, which is funny because they both have full access to me and you. And you would think that, but again, I mean, you can only give someone the wisdom that they're willing to accept.
Yeah, you can lead a horse to water.
That's right.
Again, you can't control other people.
But what it tells you is you're dealing with the same person that he's dealing with.
Right.
And yet he's having continuous conflict with her and you are not. What's the difference? The difference is the way you manage that relationship with her, the way you talk to her, the way you treat her.
It's the way you manage it.
Well, okay. Either or, whatever.
I live with a divorce coach, so she tells me what I'm supposed to say and what I'm not supposed to say.
But it does work because it also feeds into human nature, and you have to understand that, and you have to understand how to help people stop feeling fear and anxiety. If somebody is, most of the time, if somebody is being reactive, they're being angry, they're attacking you, they're doing all those things, that's really a fear-based thing. It's just that's their way of dealing with it,
right.
And so, again, just applying wisdom and trying to figure out how to manage that in a way that that benefits your family. That's really, especially, I know I'm a broken record with this, but if you guys have kids, watching little children or any age children really whose parents are at each other's throat is a heartbreak.
Yeah, it is.
It's a heartbreak every day. And so that's really, if you want to get to the root of why Thomas and I do what we do all day, every day. I have so many people that say, I don't know how you do this. Because you know what? If I can even just stop two parents from being at each other's throat enough to be, minimally courteous to one another, and I can change that by working with one person, then I've had an impact on that child.
Right.
And that's really what it's all about.
So in summary, I have the knowledge. I know the family code.
And I have the wisdom. No, I'm kidding.
Right, and she has the wisdom. No, but it's true. I mean, in my role as an attorney, I have the knowledge, and that's my realm. Okay, that's how I can help you.
Right.
But as a coach, I can help you be smart.
Right.
I can help you be wise.
Yeah.
And I can help you to control the things that you can control, so that you can have the kind of impression you want to make on the court, and be the kind of witness that you want to be in the court. You can influence the wise ones and the decision makers.
Right.
And you can have a successful case and get more time with your kids.
There you go. All right. So if you are watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you get notified as new videos come out each week. If you are listening to the podcast, please subscribe and also rate and review us. Helps other people find us, helps increase our rankings, and we appreciate the support.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.